This is episode 56 of the Why Not Me podcast, how to get specific with a goal and other things. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm a wife, mom, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a life coach. And I believe when you know who you are, you can be the best you at what you're called to do. This requires faith, wisdom, and mental wellness. That's what we talk about here. Okay, so it's the new year. It's 2022. Can you believe it? And everyone's talking about resolutions and goals and intentions and words of the year and habits, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to set a goal. I'm not going to set any resolutions. Years and years ago, I used to set like 10 resolutions that were all like had 10 parts to them. And then I whittled that down and I would set eventually, like the last few years, I've been setting one kind of big goal that I work toward. And last year was such a year of personal breakdown. And I say that in a positive way, breaking down in order to kind of rise back up again. But I just was like, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to set a goal. And maybe we'll have like an intention, a really loose intention. Maybe I'll work on an identity or something like that. But like, if it comes to me, it'll come to me, and I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to force it. I wasn't going to do a word of the year. The last couple of years, I've picked a word just because it's trendy and fun and, seems useful, seems like it would help me focus. But to be honest, I usually forget about my word a few months into the year. And oftentimes when I pick a word, it's the very opposite of what happens. And so I just was like, I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to love myself and nurture myself and be compassionate and do the same thing for other people. But I did have some kind of like really loose intentions. And then a word of the year just like fell into my lap. So like I said, I was like, I'm not doing that. And I think I was out on a walk and I was just reflecting and thinking about the last year. And it's been, 2019 was really hard for some people. And that was an amazing year for me. And then 2020, I had so much hope and I was like, this is my year and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do that. And it quickly unraveled and went a completely different direction than what I was expecting. And so now I'm just like, I just want to follow the spirit and follow my intuition and let things unfold. And I feel really good about that. But as I was reflecting and thinking about that year, I realized like it was a year, like I said, of a lot of breakdown and just, I don't know, reassessing worldviews and deep seated beliefs and working through trauma. And I'm still doing much of that work. But as I was reflecting, I just had this like image of, like when you go into the woods and there's an area where there's a lot of decomposition happening. And then right in the middle of it, there's like this little sprout. And I just thought like, arise. It's time for me to arise. I've been broken down and it's time to arise. And that word also kind of gives the connotation of like standing up over and over again. Right. And that's kind of where I feel like I am. And so I didn't set out to choose a word, but a word chose me. And so I'm going to practice it and I'm going to also let it unfold and maybe it'll change and morph. And I don't know. Today is also my daughter's birthday. Yes, I have a end of the year birthday, December 31st daughter and a January 5th daughter. So shout out to my daughter, Maya, who I'm pretty sure doesn't and won't ever listen to this podcast, but she's 15 and she's amazing. She's everything I want to be in a person. She is self-directed and talented in so many different ways and is such an amazing friend. And she's got these beautiful blue eyes and I just love her so much. So I've had a little bit of a slow start to the new year and I've just allowed all of it. But today I feel a lot more energy and I'm just feeling really good today. So today's a great day to record a podcast episode. like I said, we've got kind of, resolutions and goals and things in the air. And I do have like, I would say becoming is the best word of like, I want to become something more than what I currently am. And my kind of habit that I want to create this year that I think will support a new identity, a future identity of myself is a daily writing habit. I've been doing this podcast for almost a year, a few more weeks, and it'll be a year. And I'm getting really comfortable with my voice. And it's really easy for me to just like turn the mic on and talk. And I normally do these podcast episodes in one take. Every once in a while, I have to stop and edit something very lightly. And so that comes very naturally to me. And I think that, is why I'm here podcasting. But I do find sometimes that I am craving and drawn to writing. And one thing I read recently was that if you want to get to know yourself more, then write. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because I feel like I know myself, but maybe I haven't quite distilled down some of the things I think I know about myself. And when you have to sit down and write them, for me, it's very clunky. Like I'm a journaler and I can let my natural thoughts flow. But when I want to kind of create something intentional or something of value that I could share with the world, that's where it feels really clunky and where like I have to take all these thoughts that I have that are a little bit unwieldy and wild, and I have to edit them down and like what point am I trying to make? And that's really hard for me. And so I noticed that it's a growth edge for me. And as I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, I think I just want to create a habit, not necessarily a goal, like I want to write a book or something like that. I just want to create a habit of daily writing. And because we're just fresh off of the Personality Blueprint series, and I've been reflecting on my own strengths and personality and how I deal with expectations and, all of that stuff. I realized that I'm an obliger, and that means that the goals or the standards I have for myself always get put to the bottom of my to-do list kind of thing. And through coaching, I've been able to work on that and like move the needle a lot in that way. But it's still kind of my default or my natural tendency to need that external accountability. And so I thought, and I just thought of it in a new way. I thought, well, if I tend to need external accountability, why don't I just set myself up with external accountability? And so I'd been tossing around this idea of creating a Facebook group where everybody comes into the group with the intention of creating these habits, like in the way that James Clear does. So James Clear is an author. He wrote the book Atomic Habits, and it felt like it would help me with my habit to have this external accountability of sorts. And I don't know, it just felt like it would be more fun to have some people in there. And, like it felt like it could be a fun experiment for my business. I don't know. It just intuitively felt good and felt fun to me. And so I decided to put together this group, and it's very, very inexpensive. It's $25 for 3 months. So less than $10 a month. And I don't have specific intentions with it, like other than I want to help people create some sustainable habits instead of this sort of like, you know, shoot out the gates gung ho and have all the energy and thinking big and I can do it, and then kind of burn ourselves out. That's what I have done in the past. And it just is serving as like I said, like an accountability for me. And I just think it would be fun to do it with people and kind of swap notes and like, how are you doing this? And so I just wanted it to be like light and fun. And so that's what I did. And I put it out there, and I already have 11 people in the group. I'm super excited. There's already some good stuff going on in there. And what I have found too is that as I think about like, how can I help people create these sustainable habits? What do I know that I like would be easy for me to relay. And so it's been very like energizing and easy. I want to say like I'm operating out of flow. And so that's super fun. So if you want to join the group, we are keeping the doors open until January 15th. And then I'm going to close those doors and we're going to go until April 15th. So we're going to go for 3 full months. And like I said, it's $25. And I just want to have fun with it. And I want to support you and have you support me. And so, yeah, that's kind of a fun thing that I put together. So I will have the link for that in the show notes. I don't have I have an Instagram post that sort of outlines some of what I'm hoping to create with the group, but really it's just go pay your $25 and then I invite you into the group and we just start going. And the sooner you join, the more days that you have, because January 15th is the end of next week. So you'll get more time to kind of create a plan and start on some habits for the year. And I specifically didn't offer it until after the new year because I wanted it to not feel like this perfect thing, like this perfectionism thing, like we have to start on January 1st. And so it's all intended to help you become more of the person you want to be in a sustainable way. So there's that. And I say that because today's podcast is inspired already by the group that I just really opened up on Saturday night, like just 4 days ago or so. And so there's already some stuff in the group that I think is really valuable and some comments and things. And as I was responding to a comment, I thought, this would actually be a really good podcast. And so that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about how to get really specific with your goals and then a couple of other things that I'm throwing in here. Yes, I'm just checking my notes here. Yep, today's episode is inspired by a comment in the group. And yeah, so I want to go back to James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits. 2 of the main ideas are to create habits based off of identity versus outcome. So most of the time, what most people do is they say, I would like this outcome. I would like to lose weight. I would like to make money. I would like to write a book, something like that. And then they try to go from that outcome to breaking down into habits, right? What James Clear says is that that's kind of backwards. It's more effective if we can go the other way around. Or actually, I think I maybe have said that in a confusing way. Let me just quote James Clear here, and then I will talk about that. He says, anyone can convince themselves to practice yoga or meditation once or twice. But if you don't shift the belief behind the behavior, then it becomes hard to stick with long-term changes. Improvements are only temporary until they become part of who you are. So that's speaking to the identity part of it. So most people create an outcome that they want, but they don't think about the kind of person that would have that outcome. There we go. That's a better way to say that. He also says the goal is not to get, or these are some examples. The goal is not to get straight A's. The goal is to become a person who studies every day. And I would probably add to that, the goal is to become a good student, something like that. Here's another example from James Clear. The goal is not to finish a painting. The goal is to become an artist. The goal is not to win the game or competition. The goal is to become a person who practices every day. The ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. So you've heard me talk about my flossing habit. So the goal is not necessarily to floss, it's to become a person who flosses. Do you see the kind of subtle distinction there? So often we focus on, I want to learn how to floss every day. And it feels so hard because it feels so like I have to do this thing that I'm not used to doing and I have to remember it. And then if I don't do it, then I beat myself up and all of that. But if we think about the person, the type of person who just flosses every day, then that person has a habit of flossing, right? So the goal becomes to become a different kind of person, not necessarily the habit, although the habit comes along with it, right? I just think it's brilliant because I love identity. I think identity is so powerful. And, he gives lots of examples in his books, but one of the examples that I always think of, because my dad was a smoker, and I remember as a very young child, like wanting him to stop smoking. I don't even know, like it was the late 80s and that's what everyone did. Everyone smoked. But for some reason I had this knowledge or wisdom of like smoking is bad for you. And I remember on my 8th birthday, for my birthday, my dad asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I said, I want you to stop smoking. And so he did. He stopped smoking for a whole year because his daughter said, I want you to stop smoking for my birthday. And then when that year was over, my next birthday, he started smoking again. Isn't that so awful? So I kind of relate to this smoking thing. In James Clear's book, he talks about, people say, I want to stop smoking. They want to stop the habit. But they don't often say, I want to be a non-smoker, right? They don't identify as a non-smoker. And so he says, if we can shift the identity first, the belief, then it's so much easier for the habit or the action to come along. And so I just think that's brilliant. I love it. And of course, I'm always about becoming. I wanted to quote one more thing. He says, because really what happens in my brain when I hear this is that, okay, if it's not really about the habit, then why would I want the habit? Like if I'm going to become a healthy person, then, that will include in it like eating healthy and moving my body and things like that, not smoking, for example. I don't need to identify, I need to eat more greens or I need to, run 20 minutes a day or something like that, right? What's the point of the habit? Because his whole book is about how to create habits that stick. And so then he says this, as I say in Atomic Habits, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Each habit is like a suggestion. Hey, maybe this is who I am. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. And when your behavior and your identity are fully aligned, you are no longer pursuing behavior change. You are simply acting like the type of person you already believe yourself to be. As Benjamin Franklin quipped, the things you do often create the things you believe. So in this quote, basically what he's saying is the value of habits, the value of action is that it confirms our identity. So the two kind of go together, right? So, and I'm going to talk about some examples here in a minute, but we can think about just changing our identity, changing the beliefs about who we are. But when we bring our actions on board with this, it's easier to believe, right? So I'm a mindset coach. I believe that you could just change your beliefs and it doesn't require any action. In fact, the action comes after your beliefs. But sometimes there's a transition period where the belief is not yet, I am this kind of person, but it's, I'm trying to become this kind of person. And so this is where then you take imperfect action. You don't yet have the consistent habit, maybe, but every time you do it, every iteration is a vote, as James Clear says, a vote for your new identity, right? So you need the belief work, but you also need to take some action toward that new belief to reinforce your belief. So where does this podcast episode come in? The idea with getting specific with our goals. The problem when we set goals, not only is it that we don't set it in terms of our identities, but it's that we don't get specific enough, right? So our brain, we tend to be very, what's the word? Non-specific is the only thing I can think of. And like nebulous, and it's just like this idea in the sky, right? And so then our brain doesn't understand what that means for like, what does that look like on a Tuesday morning? And so it just kind of gives up and is like, I don't know. So we'll just go eat a cookie. Right. So for example, so many people I have seen say like, I am going to create a better morning routine. I'm all for that. I love my morning routine. But what does that even mean? Create a better morning routine. Does that mean getting up earlier? Does that mean specific actions in that morning routine? Does that it's just like so nebulous, right? For each person, it would be different. And so today I want to really talk about how to get specific when you are trying to outline an outcome that you want. And I think it's fine to have an outcome that you want. I think you can just use these ideas of identity and getting specific to help you get that outcome. So if the outcome you want, I'm not a weight loss coach, but I love using weight loss as an example because it's so easy to see. If the outcome is that you want to lose some weight, what James Clear says is first you need to think about the person that you would be if you had lost the weight, right? So he would say, what would a healthy person do? What would a healthy person think? How would a healthy person feel, right? So it's kind of like, I think of this as part of the vision casting part of setting goals is thinking of yourself in the future who already has what you want. And then asking yourself, what would they do? What would they think? What would they feel? Right? Because your habits can be thought habits or feeling habits or action habits. We tend to think of habits as actions, but it could be like, I want to create a habit of thinking positively about myself. Right. And then once you see yourself as like the healthy person or the person who has lost the weight, the person who is whatever the weight is on the scale you want to get to, what would she do? How would she eat? How would she move her body? Right. And then that helps illuminate a more specific habit, right? Like she eats fruits and vegetables, or she goes on a walk, a 45-minute walk every day, something like that, right? That is super specific and concrete. So this is why I get so excited about this, because once we get specific, once we're like, oh, I want to create a habit of a daily 45-minute walk. Okay. When are you going to do that? What's going to get in your way? If you never go on walks and you just sit at your desk or sit at home, or maybe you go to work and then come home, you're not going to all of a sudden go on 45-minute walks. You might do that once or twice, right? But what James Clear suggests is that let's start with like a minimum baseline. Let's ease our way into this, right? And so often we get so excited about the possibility of like becoming this person that we forget about the process of becoming the person, right? So 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, I came home from a mastermind meeting with the Life Coach School, and there was one specific talk that really touched me and really made me want to change. And it was a presentation about moving our bodies and feel. It was really a presentation about feeling. And she really made the case for like how moving our bodies helps us feel. And so I thought, okay, I want to do that. I want to get better at feeling. And so I want to move my body. So I just decided, okay, I'm just going to go on a walk every day. And I didn't say it had to be a certain length of time. I was just like, I'm going to go walk around the park and back. And that's about 10-15 minute walk from my house. And then I realized why I never do that. And it's because I don't like feeling cold. So this was in the fall when I came home from this meeting, and it was starting to get cold outside and I knew winter was coming. And so I thought, okay, I do want to become a person who moves their body so that I can get better at feeling. Right. And really it was, I just kind of naturally said this. It was, I want to become a person, right? Here's where the identity comes in. I want to become a person who is better at feeling her emotions. And I naturally thought about, well, what does that person do? Okay. Well, one of the suggestions was like, we could just walk. And so I realized that one of my obstacles was that I didn't want to feel cold. And so in that moment, I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to like set a goal for like 3 walks a week or a walk every day or something like that until I address this obstacle to walking, which is I don't want to feel cold. So then I set myself a goal of feeling cold. It sounds so silly, but I just thought, okay, if this is where I have to start, because right now I don't want to go on walks because it's cold and I don't want to get cold. Then I just thought, okay, my goal is to feel cold. And that like opened me up to so much more than I could have ever imagined. So it was a walk around the park, not to feel my feelings, but to feel cold, to get used to feeling cold so that my resistance to feeling cold would not prevent me from going on walks. And I realized this is kind of a snowball, but I realized, oh, I've got a lot of resistance. This is what resistance feels like. Knowing resistance will help me become a person who is better at feeling her emotions. I have to start with the resistance. So for like a year, maybe it was a year and a half, I just went on those walks, those 10, 15-minute walks, and I let myself feel cold. And I noticed when I would resist it, when my shoulders would come up to my ears and I would scrunch together and I would consciously put my shoulders back down. And I would say, Danita, you can go on a walk and you can walk all tight and scrunched up, or you can go on a walk loose. Either way, I'm still cold, right? It was a little bit of a tangent, but a good example, I think, of how we set these big goals and then we don't realize, we don't slow down enough to look at what's going to get in my way and then really start where we are, right? Start with where we are. No more, no less, just right where we are. Okay. So in my Facebook group, and it's called the 1% Habits group, somebody posted, I had asked people to post, what outcome are you hoping for? Right. And my thought was that once people start posting their outcomes, then we can talk about how to identify the identity and then how to create like a minimum baseline, really small goal that will get them there. Right. And somebody posted and she said, I know that I need to get more specific. And so I thought, okay, well, I can help her get more specific. So the first step is identify the outcome that you want, right? That's the easy part. And then step number 2 is to ask yourself why. And this step will help us get to that identity. Why do you want that outcome? And I'm going to use myself as an example. So the outcome I said I wanted for this year was to create value in the world. Now, do you see how that's like really broad and really vague, right? It's something that I think will help me in a lot of different areas, but it is very broad. My brain goes, well, what does that even mean? Create value. Does that mean cook dinner? Does that mean record a podcast? Does that mean, go help somebody out in the world? Like, what does create value in the world even mean? So step 2 is ask why. Why do you want to create value in the world? My answer is so that I can help others. And then with step 2, you keep asking why until you get to a feeling or an identity, but I think most people get to a feeling first. Why do you want to help others? Because I want to make an impact and help alleviate suffering. Why? Why do you want to make an impact and help alleviate suffering? So I can feel like I'm doing a good job. Why do you want to do a good job? Why is doing a good job important? So that I can get God's approval. That's the honest to goodness truth for myself. Why do you want God's approval? So that I can love and accept myself. Okay, there's the feelings, so that I can feel love and acceptance. Okay, so for me, it happened to be 2 feelings. Now I'm going to turn that into an identity statement so that I can be a person who feels loved and accepted. Or if you want to use an I am statement, I am loved and accepted. A person who believes I am loved and accepted, right? That's step number 2. Step number 3 is to take that identity statement and ask yourself, if you were already that identity, how would you be in the world? And then you ask yourself how 4 more times or until you get to a concrete kind of action. Okay. So what this looked like for me is I took that identity statement. I am a person who feels loved and accepted. If you already knew you were loved and accepted, how would you be in the world? Like, how would you be in the world? If I had a camera, what would it look like? And I thought, I would be loving to other people. How so? I would encourage and serve others. How exactly? I would help them love themselves the way I've learned to love myself. How? How would you help them love themselves? Through coaching, mindset, embodiment, and choice. How would you create the opportunity to do that? Okay, so that's a little bit different of a question, but I realized when I saw that answer through coaching, mindset, embodiment, and choice, what my brain was saying is like, well, how do I get people to teach this to? Right? How do I create opportunities to help people shift their mindset, help people become more embodied, and help people see where they have choice in their lives? And so then I thought, well, through my podcast and through writing and then sharing those things. So I'm considering, I have this podcast, but I'm considering also creating a blog because I want to hone the skill of writing and becoming concise and developing my own kind of concepts and thoughts and things like that. And so I thought, okay, that's more specific, write, podcast, and share. And honestly, a writing habit would support me in my podcast. And also a podcast habit supports me in my writing because it helps me come up with ideas and thoughts to write about. And podcasting is a way of sharing whatever I'm thinking about. Okay, so that's a concrete action, podcast and write, and then share it, right? Okay, so that was number 3, right? Ask how, take the identity statement. And if you were already that identity, how would you be in the world? And then ask how until you come to a concrete action. Number 4 is ask what habits would support me in this. So I've got my concrete action, write and podcast and share. So I asked what habits or systems would support me in writing, podcasting, and sharing. And I thought, okay, just a daily writing practice so that I have something to talk about and to share. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? You feel the heat? Number 5 is now you have your habit. And so I could have said, I just identified one habit that could support in any of those. Like I had 3 actions, write, podcast, share. I've already kind of got a podcasting habit. So I was like, yeah, I don't think I really need something there. And then the sharing habit, my thought was, well, I could share whatever on my podcast or on social media or whatever. But oftentimes I tell myself, I don't know what to say. And so I really I honed in on this writing habit because I want to develop my voice. Okay. Number 5 is once you have the habit, you ask, how will I know when I've completed it? And when and where will I complete this task? Studies show that when you make a plan for when and where you will complete something, you're like, it's a big number. You're like 80% more likely to do it. I don't quote me, but I have read this in books. Okay. So I asked myself these questions, create a daily writing practice. I will consider myself done when I open up Notion. That's a program I use to organize my life. Start a journal and write for 5 minutes, never letting the cursor stop for more than 5 seconds. Now that last little part, if I write for 5 minutes, I'm probably going to let it pass, but I wanted to kind of qualify it because I could sit here at my screen and be like, I don't know what to write. I don't, and maybe I'll do that some days, but I really want it to be like this flow of consciousness, because that's when we do that every single day, that's when the ideas really start to flow. When our brains go, okay, we're doing this. All right, well, then I'll stop with the resistance. We're just going to write and I'll come up with some fun stuff. Right. So I just kind of qualified that a little bit of like, we're going to write for 5 minutes. we're not going to let the cursor stop. Now, I have practiced Morning Pages by Julia Cameron. It's a really popular practice, especially for artists. What happens when I write longhand, I actually recommend that you write longhand, is that my wrist starts to hurt, and then it hurts for like a couple of weeks. So it doesn't hurt as much when I type. And so I'm kind of tweaking that and letting myself type my writing up. And then my plan for when and where, I will do this between 9:30 and 10 a.m. every morning in my office at my desk. Okay. Now, will I absolutely do this every day between 9:30 and 10? Probably not. I probably will fail at that some days. In fact, I didn't do it this morning. There's a prime example. But I know myself, and I know that if I don't do it at some point during the day, it's easy enough to squeeze 5 minutes of writing. If I get in bed and I haven't done my 5 minutes of writing, then I will get out of bed and I will go do my 5 minutes of writing. That is how I created a flossing routine. If I got in bed and I remembered, oh, I didn't floss, I would get out of bed and I would go floss, because I was telling myself, this is important to me. It's important enough to push back my sleep. And my sleep is pretty important to me. Okay, so those are the 5 steps. And let me just reiterate them, recap. Number 1, identify an outcome that you want. Number 2, ask yourself why you want that outcome, and then keep asking why 4 more times or until you get to a feeling or an identity. And then turn that feeling statement into an identity statement. Number 3, take the identity statement and ask, if you were already this identity, how would you be in the world? And then ask how 4 more times or until you get to a concrete action. It can be broad still, but something that's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Number 4, ask, what habits would support me in this action? And identify one habit. I would say no more than 2 habits. You know yourself, so you know what you can handle, but work on one at a time. And when you have one habit in place that you've done every single day for at least 2 weeks in a row, then you can start adding more in. And lastly, identify, how will you know when you've completed the habit, and when and where will you complete it? Every day, every week, whatever. Now, James Clear, he says that it's not really about the amount of time it takes. It's really about the number, the increments, how many times you've done this habit. So a habit that we identify that's a daily habit, we're going to do it once a day. But if you want to speed up the process, then do the habit more than once a day. So then it becomes an iteration. That's the word I was looking for earlier. So it could be, if you want a habit like I'll use an example from somebody in the group. She said she wanted to follow through on the things she promised herself. So you have potential to do that multiple times a day, right? So then it wouldn't be about the number of days. It would be about the number of times you attempt or complete that habit, right? So if you want to speed up your progress, then put more iterations in a day. Okay. That's some good stuff. And that's a lot. So I would love to know if you have any questions. Reach out to me on social media, or come join my 1% Habits group. This is exactly what we're doing in the group. The first couple weeks, we're going to be identifying and kind of like planning and setting up our habits, because it's a really important part that most people rush through. And then the rest of the 3 months, we're just going to be failing at our habits and learning from those failures. Why didn't I do it? What got in the way? What were the obstacles? And then trying over and over again, and getting support through accountability and through coaching. So come on over and join us. It's going to be so much fun. And if it's not fun, it's at least going to make us more of the people that we want to be. That's enough for now. And so are you. If this episode made you think about yourself or others in a new way, would you please give it a rating and a review? And if you want to truly do the work of being the best you at what you do, go to DanitaBremer.com to schedule a free session with me. Until next time, Go be you and follow the Spirit.